Hey guys, how you doing?
Check, check.
Thanks for being here today. We got two legends that never die that are here with us. We got, they're not that old, but they're getting up there. Getting up there now, not that young anymore. I mean, compared to Scott, they're kind of young, but...
Very funny.
Well, thanks for being here today, guys. We appreciate you guys coming all day today. It's always great to have amazing people at the DNA House. And Arthur, we appreciate you coming by again to grace us with your presence. I think that you have a massive fanboy over here in Scott. So I'll let Scott do the introduction.
So my introduction, I started reading, Arthur's posts, comments, X feeds, blogs, and this is one of the greatest macroeconomic experts in crypto that I've ever seen in my life, and I'm honored that he's here. And for the first time, after like 5 events, I actually got a chance to meet him. Arthur Hayes, please give him a hand.
And in addition to your hands, by a show of hands, Scott just gave quite the endorsement. How many of you follow him? All right, so I was going to say if you don't, you should, because I don't think you could get a better endorsement than what you saw there. So I like to talk about past, present, and future because I think it's important. Our industry has grown massively thanks to the great pioneers like Arthur and others, many of whom have been are here in Vegas because wow, how this industry has grown and what a different time it is. But we'll get into how good it is today. I'd love to begin with your, because again, not everybody was here. So much of this is reminding the people how we got here. And as one of the great pioneers that took the arrows and is still present to continue to charge forward on behalf of the greatness and the potential of all, where did your journey begin? How did you end up in this business? And to have the courage, to be here.
So, hi everyone, Arthur. I'm a TradFi Muppet by training. I went to university in Philly, and then I moved out to Hong Kong in 2008 to work at Deutsche Bank. And my first day on the trading desk was the day after Lehman went bankrupt in Hong Kong. And, I was like, oh, great, this is, this great career that you all studied for, and are we going to have a job in 6 months? Obviously I did, thankfully. And I started on the exchange-traded fund trading desk. I traded a lot of derivatives. I lived in Hong Kong and worked for 2 banks. And by 2013, I was shown the door by Citibank. I was trading derivatives there. And I was like, oh, well, what am I going to do with my life now? I wasn't really making the kind of money I wanted to make in finance. The job was very, very boring, at least for myself. And I thought, well, I want to do something different. And I had heard about Bitcoin on Zero Hedge, randomly reading it one day at work. I didn't really pay any much attention to it. I saw the price went to like $250. Like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know what that means in the context of anything. And so now that I have a bunch of time on my hands, what am I going to do? Well, I read the Bitcoin white paper, and I was like, wow, this really resonates with me. I was a bit of a gold bug. I had my gold coins in the safe of the bank, and the Fed's going to bankrupt everybody and all that kind of stuff, right? I didn't really...
Well, you had an inside track.
Maybe not yet. We'll get there at some point, but maybe not in 2011. And so when I read the white paper and sort of the ethos of where Satoshi got some of these ideas from, maybe I couldn't obviously understand the math and the cryptography, but the philosophy behind it really made a lot of sense. And okay, well, let me just try it out. What is this Bitcoin thing? So I did as much research as I can, went on Reddit, read about all the different exchanges, all the different companies, how do you buy it, how do you sell it, are there derivatives? And I had this little map of all the exchanges, and then I decided, okay, well, I should just buy some and figure it out. So I sent some money to MT Gox in Japan, and then I started trading it. And I was doing arbitrage for a while in Hong Kong, trading Bitcoin between China and Hong Kong, doing some derivative stuff. And after a while, I was like, well, okay, this is great. I'm making decent money. I'm not really doing a whole lot of work. And as a trader, you know that if it's a good trade, it always goes away because it gets competed out because, it wasn't that hard. So how do I create a real business? And I was like, I know derivatives trading, so let me create a derivatives exchange for Bitcoin. And I went out and through my network found my 2 co-founders and convinced them that we should build this platform trading derivatives on Bitcoin, which really didn't exist at the time. And that was, 2014, and sort of, 10 years later, I'm here.
Well, I remember as you were starting, because we were talking about it back in the early days. But obviously you built a very successful business at the time, a huge business. And then, how many people had their bank accounts shut off? Anybody that was a victim of Choke Point 2.0 and many of the other things. As you know, if you were a pioneer in this business, you were under attack. And the newcomers may not understand, or even those that were around that were not high profile, the risks that the pioneers were taking to go out and build infrastructure to enable, this incredibly brave new world that has been created. I'd love to understand a little bit about the difficulties that you had, because, if you weren't there, you don't understand the sacrifices, that many of the pioneers or legends in this space undertook and had to experience for us to be here and present today.
Yeah, obviously, bank accounts is an easy one. No one got bank accounts. I've lived in Hong Kong, and so, it was a bit of a cat and mouse game of how I'm like, okay, what do you actually do? Oh, I'm a currency trader. Oh, what kind of currencies do you trade? Oh, this and that. And after a while, it became clear what you actually did, and then you lost that bank account and all those financial services. And, all of a sudden, you get regulators coming after you and saying, oh, we don't really have a rule against it, but we don't really like what you're doing, so can you please stop? But, there's no real reason, law against it. We just don't like it, kind of thing. And so that was, all over Asia, was where I lived. BitMEX has been kicked out of countries. We politely left when we were told to leave. What are you going to do? That's just the name of the game. And obviously, I lost against the U.S. government, a few years ago, and had to serve some house arrest in Miami for 6 months, and that was not fun, obviously. I've been vindicated with a pardon, I guess, a few months ago, but... But yeah, there has been, countless others who've experienced worse. But at the end of the day,
But how big was BitMEX at its peak?
So we were the largest exchange in the world by trading volume at our peak, probably in 2020, before COVID hit.
Biggest exchange in the world by trading volume.
Yeah, so we invented the perpetual swap. I'm sure you all have traded some variant of that particular product, and I think over time, everyone's going to trade these things because it's just a better way to trade. And I think crypto is at the forefront of financial technology, and what people have liked to trade because of the constraints that we face as an industry is now becoming the standard. As the 20-year-old in 2020 is approaching 30, and they are the next future for the world anywhere around the world. So yeah.
So on the most incredible rocket ship to the biggest in the world, pioneering, with all this background, having to get bounced around to eventually experiencing what fortunately not many have had to, which is what was happening here in the U.S. government. And this is, a lot of other governments say go away, and you do, but the reach of the U.S. government is unlike any other. And to then become a victim of lawfare and a regulatory body, even though no laws are against you, using the power of the U.S. government to persecute you. Thank God that first they fight you and then you win. We have a government in the United States. We have a crypto president. We have a crypto president of the United States that has said that this is going to be the crypto capital of the world. March 7th changes everything, not just here, but everywhere. We've got a crypto mayor. The mayor of New York City arrives tonight, speaks after J.D. Vance tomorrow. What a change. I get to go to bed at night not worrying about my future and my safety, at least for now. Yeah. At least for now.
Things change.
At least for now, which is don't be apathetic again. We have to make sure that now first they fight you, then you win. We don't whine, we win. We have the numbers, and we have the resources to ensure that we don't go back to those olden days as long as we continue to participate and fight the good fight, which we can. And I look at the politicians that are presenting here. What a change. And thank you to our crypto president that recognizes the important role that the Arthur Hayes of the world play for our collective future and has made sure to give him the grace that he much deserved. So would love to talk to you about today, this present moment. Like, how does it feel? How do you perceive it? What are you doing, right now? What is it that you're up to today? And then we can get into the future after.
Yeah, I mean, what are we doing today? We just number go up, right? Everyone, that's what we're here for. It's
all-time highs.
Yeah, so I run my own family office. We're a fund. It's called Maelstrom. We invest in early stage crypto projects. We do a bit of liquid trading, and a new thing that we just launched is a buyout fund. So we've actually identified a few cash flow positive crypto companies that are kind of underlooked, and we're going to buy them, repackage them, and SPAC them because the capital markets are open, and let's play the game. So
well, here's the new line. The IPO is the new ICO.
Yeah.
Or the ICO has now become the IPO.
Yeah. Why not?
It is.
Yeah.
Again, welcome to the evolution of finance.
Yeah.
That's called We've Made It.
Yeah.
We're on the main stage. And so, that's good. Thank you for giving everybody an update on where you're at, what you're doing. But I think the most important thing as a visionary, as someone that has been pioneering and paving the way, here we are, we've made it, right? And this is what the present market opportunity is. But I think the biggest thing that we all crave is that future insight, which is the ultimate alpha, right? Where are we going? What do you see for the future? And how would you inform people with whatever insight it is so they can start not thinking about where the puck is, but where the puck is going? What should we be thinking about with your brilliant, ability to foresee market macroeconomics and what do you think happens with the market in the months and years to come?
I mean, I try to keep it very, very simple, and all I care about is, from a trading perspective, is how many units of fiat are there today, how many will there be in the future, and what does the market believe that trajectory is? So, if the market expects a massive amount of money printing and it doesn't happen, then the price goes down. But then if it's expecting money to contract and then it doesn't, then the price goes up. And so I kind of look at that. And then right now, if we take a look at the US, which is probably the worst offender of any government, it's runaway debt problems. And, everyone's talking about it. Nobody wants to do anything about it because it's politically difficult to sort of say, I'm going to take your goodies away. No more free money for you, and you, right? It's not a partisan thing. And so if you look around the world, it's everywhere. We have a group of politicians globally that have convinced the population that they're going to solve their problems, and how they're going to do it, they're going to print the money. And there's never going to be a problem. There's never going to be austerity. We're not going to extinguish the credit. We're not going to punish people who are over-leveraged. If you're politically connected, you get the money at the end of the day. And so I think as people start to continue to realize that, then they go, okay, I get this crypto thing, right? Yes, the technology works, decentralization and all that, but 21 million cap on Bitcoin, okay, well, if they print an infinite amount of money, then my Bitcoin goes to infinity in fiat terms. Now, what that's worth in a barrel of oil, I don't know, but at the end of the day, it's pretty clear how we're going as a global society. No politician is campaigning on, hey, I'm going to close your business because the person before you took out too much credit, and sorry, we need to make the system rectify, and you're the victim this time. That's not good politics. It's not happening.
So I advise governments all over the world, often heads of state and central bankers and all the things. What advice would you give me to give them? With that said,
buy Bitcoin, because there's no. I guess at the end of the day, the number one goal of a politician is to get reelected. Austerity is not a reelectable platform in any country, regardless if you're a democratic system or an autocratic system. Okay, Argentina is an outlier, but they tried Peronism for 60 years, and so we can't really use that as, oh yeah, there's one country like Argentina out there. Well, they fucked up for 50 years until they got to this point, so I don't think the rest of the world is at that point right now. So, yeah, I think they're going to continue to do the same thing because they want to get reelected.
So a politically popular position that doesn't require, let's chop off your legs.
Yeah.
is let's at least try to give our nation state some financial stability, have an economic participation, whether it be in treasuries, Bitcoin strategic reserves. Let's at least, if you can't beat them, join them.
Or
right?
at least, I mean, I'm a bit critical of Bitcoin with strategic reserves, more from if they buy it for a political reason, they might sell it for a political reason. But, I've yet to see a country sort of roll out the red carpet like US did for big tech in the early 90s in terms of, hey, you guys just do your thing. Don't worry about what people do on your platform. We want you to innovate. If you had a country or countries that did something like that, the rush of people that would go to develop the new financial system and spend money as they became rich would be insane. And I really don't see that happening yet. People talk about it, but that would be sort of the next level, I think.
Well, I'd like to invite you, to any country that I think is receptive and ready to hear that message. I'd love to, engage in some of that. Obviously, we had the equivalent with President Bukele. Thank you, El Salvador, for that incredible leadership. Obviously, Malay, but I agree with you. Unique circumstance that's not automatically repeatable. Obviously, we're seeing great things here. The UAE has vision. Small countries like Palau or Estonia. But what I've seen after March 7th, when I talk to the biggest institutions and family offices or governments, the answer was always the same. We get it. Sounds great. But what's the United States going to do? And everybody was waiting to see what the U.S. was going to do because that kind of matters. Now that we have U.S. leadership around this position, obviously lots more to be done, but we're just a few months in. There's an incredible receptive I was just with the president of Ghana, for example. I was down in Africa 2 months ago, and I talked to probably 80% of the African nations. There are countries that are ready to be brave and bold, that are also in similarly challenged situations. Africa, in particular, because they don't have access to credit. They don't have credit worthiness. And so I've been talking about a lot of big ideas, and I'd love to engage with you privately because they can't really be all stated publicly yet, unless you want to be Gaddafi or something. Without getting permissions to do things that I think are the right thing for us to collectively do to, again, create a better, brighter world. But I'd love to, you seem like I know you are the type that could engage with the world's leaders and help them think, because just because everyone's avoiding it from a political perspective doesn't mean they are not concerned with it. And there is a receptiveness in the world right now to listen and learn, because if you are a leader of a nation, if you are responsible for a population, even better, a former leader, because the former leaders are out of the hamster wheel, and they understand the issues, and now they get to reflect on it, but they're in a position to also understand how to navigate their nation's futures and their legacies, and how to support their constituents and their people. And there is a lot of concern right now. I mean, we live in the most challenging period in human history, which is just an opportunity, right? Every challenge is that. And the question is, do you rise to the occasion and figure out how to overcome? We're living in a period of time where nations are going to rise and fall. And the fate of those nations or those people often depend upon the leaders that they put in office. The ostriches are going to get run over by, the oncoming train of change. And so I'd love to invite you to a couple of those conversations. Sure. And so, because it's important. We have an opportunity, and our opinions are heard. There's merit in the work that we've done, and the future favors the bold. My favorite virtue is courage. And so while you're here in Vegas the rest of this time, I mean, what are the things that you look at from an investment perspective as you're actively looking at startups? Where do you think the big opportunities are? Where is the alpha, that you would, feel comfortable sharing with the audience here?
What is the goal of Maelstrom? We trade stuff to earn more Bitcoin. So we make a profit and then buy more Bitcoin and just keep that stockpile growing. What do I like in the non-Bitcoin space? I think we're going to move back to projects that actually have cash flows, real clients who spend real money, and then that cash flow goes back to token holders in some way, shape, or form. And there's very, very few projects that do all three of those things. And I think after, 3 cycles of doing this, we're finally going to learn and not just reward complete dog shit with our money. Yes, of course there will be some new thing that we all trade because it's fun. But I think if your coin is already launched and you don't have product market fit and you don't have clients and you have a massive, on paper valuation, it's going to be very, very tough to grow into that. I think we're finally tired of that sort of business model, and we're going to reward people who have generated real businesses in this ecosystem. So again, I think there's still a lot of undervalued stuff out there because 2023 and 2024 was very rough on a lot of projects. Apart from if you own Bitcoin and maybe Solana, a lot of stuff did not perform very well, even though they might have millions of customers that are paying money and they're giving money back to token holders. So I think there's a lot of opportunity out there. It's just not in the most hyped projects that you see on social media.
So what I heard is fundamentals.
Yeah, cash flow. Like, I know it's not very sexy and boring, it's not, but cash flow, that's what I love.
So I'm going to ask not a controversial question, but you already made a comment about, market and arbitrage, and with time that arbitrage disappears. So kind of the leading business model we're seeing in the public markets right now is Bitcoin treasuries, whether it be 21, Nakamoto, strategy, so on and so forth, but you're seeing a huge multiple on Bitcoin treasuries. I'm curious what you think the future holds for that business model, because that is a huge arbitrage, and as markets go, and as you see more and more and more businesses launching in the public markets with that strategy, where does it go?
So, I am long-term bearish on that as a strategy. I think MicroStrategy is unique in terms of how they've done it because, at least for the most part, they issue non-dilutive capital to the common stockholders. Whereas a lot of these strategies, it's I have a company that does fuck all, I do a rights issue of common, and all of a sudden the share count blows up, and then it's just a game of hot potato to wait for the investors to dump it, right? Because you've essentially diluted the company by issuing all these shares. And it's hot right now, but at a certain point, all the investors who cannot invest in Bitcoin invest in a Bitcoin ETF and can only invest in a listed equity that doesn't say Bitcoin on it, because I'm still, banks like HSBCs don't allow you to buy a Bitcoin ETF, like crazy shit like that. Once that all goes away, then where is the person who's going to buy Bitcoin at a premium through this equity wrapper? And once that fizzles, then everyone's not going to buy these things anymore because they're not going to go up in value. So it's a great strategy. The bankers and the lawyers are crushing it, making fees. If you're in one of these deals, you're doing well, but it's a momentum trade. And when the tide turns, and I don't know when that's going to be, you're going to want to hit that sell button real quick.
Thank you, because I think it's important. As not you, because you're not the retail, but it's a retail trap for most. And so, what other? Maybe we want to hear a question or two for the great Arthur Hayes. Anyone have any questions on his market wisdom that you'd like to have answered?
Actually, I have a question on the Bitcoin, the pile of Bitcoin the governments they want to buy, right? It's the reserve. My experience with governments is that if they see a pile of cash, they take out debt against it. And so I've heard a lot of reasons why we want a Bitcoin reserve. You say they spend it, I say they take out debt against it. And it seems to me like having a giant pile of cash, of Bitcoin for that, may exacerbate the problem rather than making it better.
That's the question, at least for the United States, is they're a deficit country, so they don't have a surplus. Where are they going to fund it from? Yes, they could revalue the gold, but at the end of the day, if you're a politician and you have a pile of money that could buy Bitcoin, or it could do some piece of pork barrel project in your district, or it could buy long-term treasury. There's all sorts of options to do with the cash, right? So what's the most politically feasible when you're going to go up for re-election and you're going to have to face your constituents? Like, okay, well, you had this money. What did you do with it? I bought Bitcoin. Okay, well, maybe that's viewed politically positive, or maybe it's not. But at the end of the day, I think that's the issue when you have these piles of random assets that you'd acquire. Oh, yes, it goes up in value, but so what? If the end constituent feels like they didn't benefit in any way, shape, or form from it, then you might get penalized as a politician for essentially either A, borrowing money on the national credit card to buy this asset, or B, redirecting funds that could have gone to building a hospital, building a school, and you bought Bitcoin. And maybe you don't get the rewards of the ballot box that you thought you would get.
On that same note, that adds a question if you're familiar with the bit bond sort of concept. You know, the idea of when a bond is being issued, that there's a component to that bond that would be allocating some portion of it to Bitcoin to then go do all of those things, where you get to have your cake in theory and eat it too. What do you think about that concept as a bond issuance that includes some portion of the bond, might be 10% of it, that's allocating to buying treasury Bitcoin for the municipality, the state, the nation, et cetera?
Again, it's how is it used, right? At the end of the day, right? If the end constituent says, "Oh, they just bought some Bitcoin and it made a bunch of people rich that I don't know and I don't have a very favorable opinion of," then I don't really like that. But if, okay, they bought Bitcoin, it went up, and my taxes went down, or they built a new gymnasium or whatever, right? They need to see some tangible return, not just a number on a screen going up. Doesn't really, at least in my opinion, if I'm a politician, that's what I would think about.
So Arthur's got another dinner he's got to go to, so we're going to take the last two questions. Scott went first, he'll finish. We have two last questions, three, and then Scott will be the wrap. Please.
Appreciate you guys being here. So for those of us that are crypto native users, or in the trenches, so to speak, what do you guys both believe is maybe the single biggest avenue or way that we can further help bridge the gap between people who are not native to crypto? Like, where do you think we're missing the mark in terms of actually educating and onboarding people?
Patience. Like, I think a lot of people get in this game because they've seen the very outlandish, "Oh yeah, I made a bunch of money in a week trading whatever I traded." That's why I get into crypto, because I can make money real quick. And yes, there are very few people who hit it big, but most people are going to lose all their money and then they're going to say, "Oh, is this crypto thing a scam?" Right? I got into it because this influencer said they're going to get rich, and then I didn't, because you thought that just because it's Bitcoin, it's the most volatile asset in human history, that means that you're guaranteed to make money in 1 minute because you put on a trade. So I think getting rid of that mindset and being patient is probably the best thing for everybody.
And then to all the entrepreneurs here in the room, we've been building consumer-friendly products that have real user interfaces. It's all not just code, but allowing the next generation, your parents, people that are not inherently native, you got to have a good user interface. It's got to be secure, safe, and easy to use. A big part of it is, if you were around, it's not really until now we've had really functional, user-friendly infrastructure to allow you to access things. Most people are not going to become coders at this age in their life, and so it's got to be user-friendly. We're pretty much there. You've got to have basically the government consensus and support. We're pretty much there. There's almost nothing holding us back, but again, buyer beware and patience, and understand. I've never encouraged people to buy Bitcoin or anything else for that matter, other than to make an investment in themselves, in their own knowing. I say, go buy $100, buy $20. You'll start to figure it out from there. But, I'm not going to tell you to go back up the truck. The ETFs have changed that. I actually think the ETFs are great. A lot of people are like, well, that's not self-custody. I go, what it's doing is allowing people to engage and participate without having to take the risks. It's a great way. Obviously, that doesn't change the fact that not your keys, not your coin, but you're still trying to make an easy onboarding process. And I think it's great because it's allowed us to access capital markets, which is why we're at an all-time high. We wouldn't be over $100,000 today if it was not for, the BlackRocks and the major financial institutions getting behind. And we also wouldn't have the government support we have today if the powers that be, again, those players, didn't find a way for themselves to profit from this. I mean,
it's an open system. Why we shouldn't ban anyone? Come on in.
Exactly, and I've always been a strong advocate for that. It's raised, from some people concerns. It's like, no, come one, come all. We're not trying to win against anyone. We're trying to win together. Let's bring everybody in, and the biggest tent there's ever been. We have one here.
Yeah, thanks. Back on the subject of bonds and government support, in relation to the no-show that happened last week, does that worry you? Does that excite you?
The no-show?
To the bond sale last week.
I'm not familiar. What happened?
The government went to issue new bonds for our debt, and there was basically no interest. So in relation to either purchasing our own debt or, changing the Brock.
Well, I was brought up.
Yeah, thank you, Brock.
We have a debt issue.
Yeah.
And there's a restructuring that needs to occur here. It's the reason why tariffs have been a big part of the conversation, is normalizing trade and making sure that we're not just being exploited and trying to have fair trade where both parties are winning. Historically, the U.S. has largely been, if you know the right people, you can get what you want, and that's often been at odds with the best interest of America and its future. You know, those conversations are hopefully normalizing that, bringing back industry, job creation, revenue. You know, this is another thing that for decades we've been pushing away critical infrastructure that is at odds with national security interests to places wherever we could get the best short-term quarterly results. A lot of these big issues are attempted to be addressed, and I hope we're not a day late and a dollar short. But, you know, a big part of it is instilling confidence in America's future. You know, look at Tether. That's become, you know, I started it. $85 billion of, you know, U.S. treasuries have been bought by Tether. And if stable coins continue to drive demand in the dollar internationally for trade settlement, because Bitcoin is not a good medium of exchange, the dollar is still the preferred instrument for now. You know, but there's many things at play here. There is no singular silver bullet. But at least we're having the conversation. There's finally some efforts being made to address the underlying issue so that we can avert, you know, a complete implosion and disaster and failing of the system. I support minimizing chaos and suffering. And how with our ingenuity, you know, how with our great creativity, you know, can we find ways to avoid that? But this is a concern everybody's been, you know, it's been we've been driving at 88 miles an hour. Let's use Back to the Future numbers. We've been going 88 towards a cliff with no skid marks. Right now, at least the brakes are on. And we're not just hoping and praying that we're going to flash into a better future. We're going through the unfortunate, painful process of some form of austerity measure and at least trying to get the rest of the world to play or pay their part.
So glad I have the last question. Arthur, when does quantum become a problem for Bitcoin and every other issue?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. I think if it was actually a problem today, or we thought it was, then the price would be zero. So I think it's one of those binary events. So I'm not particularly worried about it per se. I mean, I'll wait for people who are much smarter than me to opine on when quantum is going to be a problem. I wouldn't worry about it because, again, if it was a problem, the price would be zero right now.
I won't claim to be smarter, but I will claim to perhaps know more about this issue. It was predicted to be 20 years out. Obviously, we've seen rapid change. You know, I was an investor in D-Wave, and I build photonic semis and all sorts of things. As of today, it's looking like 2027. The good news is, like we said earlier, the ingenuity of this community is the reason I have no cause for concern. We are approaching, call it Q-Day or this issue faster than anyone had imagined because we are accelerating in ways that we had never envisioned. But that doesn't mean that you need to be concerned. The smartest minds in the world are making sure that we can address this issue. So it's not one to be concerned with unless this happens to be in your wheelhouse, but get involved in the projects that are going to figure out how to address the problem before it really is one. But it's nearer than people think, and it doesn't mean the market's going to zero. It's just an existential threat that we have to overcome like many others. And I believe in this community more than any other community in the world. We are the best and the brightest. We are best in class. And as long as we put our heads together, I think that we will find a solution to more or less any problem that we face because innovation is our answer and we are at the forefront of all of it. Courageous and bold, ready to rise to the occasion. Let's go. Arthur Hayes.
Thank you.